Welcome back to Genki Zone. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, go ahead and hit that button. Today, we're jumping right into a brand new explainer all about Edinburgh's epic 350 million year story. We're going to look at how this incredible capital wasn't just shaped by kings, queens, and philosophers, but by the literal earth it stands on. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We're starting with Born from Volcanoes, then climbing up to the mighty Castle Rock, navigating Surviving the Old Town, exploring the Scottish Enlightenment, and finally wrapping up with Preserving Edinburgh's Future. Section 1. Born from Volcanoes. Okay, to really understand Edinburgh, you gotta realize this city wasn't just built on a pretty landscape. It was built directly on top of a massive, dramatic geological event. The secret to this whole landscape? It's a geological concept called a crag and tail. Imagine a giant, incredibly hard block of rock. That's your crag. When massive Ice Age glaciers move across the land, they scrape basically everything away, but they can't easily bulldoze that hard rock, so the ice just flows around it. The crag acts like a shield, protecting this long slope of softer rock, trailing right behind it. That is the tail. Check out how this evolves over an absolutely mind-blowing timeline. 350 million years ago, this whole area was a warm, wet landscape south of the equator, literally dominated by erupting volcanoes. The magma eventually cooled into the super tough crystalline rock, like basalt and dolerite. Fast forward to about 2 million years ago, and boom, Scotland is buried under ice a kilometer thick. As those glaciers ground their way eastward, they scooped away all the soft sedimentary rock, but left that tough volcanic plug standing proud, perfectly sheltering the softer tail of rock behind it. The end result? The famous Royal Mile sloping gently down from the towering Castle Rock. It's just an awe-inspiring thought, right? You're walking on magma that cooled millions of years before dinosaurs even existed. So tell us below, would you build your permanent home on top of a 350 million-year-old extinct volcano? Let us know in the comments. Which brings us to Section 2, the mighty Castle Rock. We're shifting gears from deep geology to the humans who took one look at this towering crag and saw its immense defensive value. I mean, humans saw this 138-foot-high rock and immediately knew, okay, this is the ultimate fortress. Around 1000 BC, an Iron Age Celtic tribe called the Vadadini built a hill fort here. Jump to 1130 AD, King David I built St. Margaret's Chapel, which, amazingly, is still the oldest surviving building in Edinburgh today. Through the Middle Ages, this castle saw some intense warfare. Like in 1314, during the Wars of Scottish Independence, Thomas Randolph, Robert the Bruce's nephew, led this completely daring night raid to retake it from the English. And by 1457, the defenses leveled up with the arrival of Mons Meg, one of the greatest medieval cannons ever made. And these details brilliantly illustrate just how wild the castle's history actually is. It literally holds the title of the most besieged place in Britain. But, it wasn't always some glorious, impenetrable defense. In 1639, a Covenanter force captured the whole thing in just 30 minutes. Even funnier, during the 1715 Jacobite Rising, an attack completely failed simply because the rebels brought ladders that were too short to scale the walls. You can't make this up. The castle also doubled as a highly secure prison for French privateers and POWs in the 18th century, and it even has a charming little dog cemetery for the beloved canine mascots of the military regiments. All right, Section 3, Surviving the Old Town. Let's head down the slope of the tail now, stepping away from the kings and soldiers and into the incredibly cramped, chaotic lives of everyday people. Because Edinburgh was built on that narrow geological tail, it literally couldn't grow outwards, it had to grow upwards. This led to these crazy towering 10 and 11-story vertical tenements. And the social structure here is just fascinating. Wealthy lawyers might live on the third floor, while a baker worked on the ground floor, and poorer families were tightly packed into the tiny rooms way up top. Branching off the main street were the closes, these steep, dark, super narrow alleyways. Specific trades clustered together in these closes. So back then, you navigated your way home not just by sight, but by the overwhelming punch-in-the-face smells of fishmongers, tanners, or candle makers. Just think about this staggering quote from an English traveler at the time. A single Edinburgh stair contained more people than an entire street in London. The overcrowding was just beyond our modern comprehension. So why were they all so trapped? Well, aside from the steep drops on either side of the ridge, there was the Nor Loch. Back in 1460, King James III deliberately flooded the valley to the north for defense. Over time, this loch essentially morphed into a massive, stagnant, open sewer that literally trapped the booming population on their narrow, rocky ridge. Picture yourself trying to navigate the intense odors, the disease, and the unbelievably tight spaces of the old town, all while basically trapped behind a defensive loch. Do you think you would have survived medieval Edinburgh? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Moving on to Section 4, the Scottish Enlightenment. Because amazingly, out of all this extreme squalor and crowded vertical living came a brilliant intellectual explosion in the 18th century. The unbearable overcrowding finally forced the city to break out. That horribly polluted Nor Loch was eventually drained, and in 1767, an incredibly elegant, symmetrical new town was designed by James Craig. This new space finally allowed the middle class to spread out into wide, beautiful, classical streets. The city totally transformed overnight, becoming this massive hub for publishing, philosophy, and medicine. It even became known worldwide as the Athens of the North. Let's compare two absolute titans who walked these very streets. On one side, you've got Adam Smith, who published The Wealth of Nations in 1776, completely establishing the foundational concepts of modern economics and the division of labor. On the flip side, you have James Hutton, the founder of modern geology, who published Theory of the Earth in 1795. And this is where our explainer comes full circle. Hutton looked at the Salisbury Crags, those 350-million-year-old volcanic rocks right there in Edinburgh's landscape, and suddenly realized that the Earth wasn't just a few thousand years old, like the biblical timescales of the era suggested. He coined this revolutionary concept of deep time, arguing that the Earth is incomprehensibly ancient. So the very rocks that formed Edinburgh's physical foundation directly inspired the science that changed how humanity understands the age of our entire planet. How cool is that? It was truly a golden age of thought. If you were sitting in an Edinburgh coffee house back then, which side would you take? Would you be studying the flow of money with Adam Smith or the deep history of the Earth with James Hutton? Let us know below. Which brings us right back to the present day and our final section, preserving Edinburgh's future. So how do we actually protect a city that is practically a living, breathing museum? According to the official 2024 to 2035 Heritage Management Plan, physical decay isn't the only threat to this World Heritage Site. The plan specifically calls out intellectual risk, which basically means apathy or a lack of public awareness and understanding. On top of that, there's a major organizational risk when it comes to poor coordination and inadequate funding. Keeping this history alive requires some seriously active, coordinated narrative building. And the physical stakes today, they're incredibly high. Because Edinburgh sits on this super concentrated crag and tail topography, it has been continually occupied for literally thousands of years. The management plan points out that every single time there's a significant modern development in the Old Town, there's a massive potential for disturbing priceless, completely undiscovered archaeology. The sheer scale of the preservation effort required right now is just staggering. Experts have to manage nearly 4,500 individual buildings within the site, and over 75% of those are officially listed for historic interest. They have to somehow balance the everyday needs of a modern functioning capital city with sustainable tourism, all while mitigating the very real impacts of climate change on these ancient structures. It is an absolute constant battle against time, the elements, and public apathy. Which leaves us with a truly complex puzzle. How do we successfully balance the preservation of a 350-million-year-old landscape topped with thousands of incredibly fragile medieval and Georgian buildings against the crushing demands of sustainable modern tourism and city life? It's a massive challenge, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on how to solve it in the